Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the risk of going down this rabbit hole one more time, I just want to kind of begin with where we are with data collection, because I've listened, and I think in some ways I feel like we're ships passing through the night here and not really hearing. You do not require the transfer of personally identified information other than to do consumer services based on a complaint. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's generally correct, although in enforcement and supervision matters where we're going to be getting money back to consumers, we ultimately will need to have information to get the money back to consumers. Or
These wouldn't be individual complaints. This would be kind of a broad sweeping kind of investigation where you then would require individual information?
So, for example, and I could name names of institutions, but they're public, where we had credit card add-on matters, ultimately we have to get money back to consumers.
Right.
Now, either we can work the institution to do that, or we may have to
I think my
pull the
point
data
is,
ourselves.
in terms of your data collection, the only way you would have personally identified data would be if it were necessary to serve the consumer, either in a broad complaint or an individual complaint.
I believe that's exactly correct.
Right.
And there's no purpose for me having it otherwise. It just gets in my way and my team's way in terms of doing our work.
Okay, and do institutions send you a bulk amount of data that actually has that information with it, requiring you to scrub it, or do you always get information with that's been scrubbed and where Social Security numbers and personally identified information has been removed?
So on that, what I would like to do is have our staff come and brief your staff on all of our data collections.
I think there's enough interest here that maybe just a report back to the committee would,
That's fine.
would
Okay.
be very helpful.
We can do that. That is typically our aim, and I believe it's true in all circumstances, but I'm always hesitant to say all without making sure my staff tells me that that's correct.
And I want to make one final point on this, which is interesting to me, is that where we are deeply concerned about what you have, we should be equally deeply concerned about the cybersecurity of the information where it resides, which is with the companies that you access every day. And so they are going to have, any breach of their data is much more damaging than access to your data that is being used for market analysis.
Sure. Target, Home Depot, I mean, that's account information, Social Security numbers, those kinds of things, very problematic.
I think another thing that would be helpful, and obviously we have found great response from your agency on what's rural and what isn't. We think that you probably have made the right decisions in North Dakota, but I'm curious as to the percentage of land mass in this country that you've determined is in fact rural. So if you could get that to me, that would be great. Also would reiterate Senator Tester's concern about consultation and would be interested in follow-up on consultation with tribes as well. That's
Okay.
part of the overall scheme in a government-to-government relationship. We need all agencies to appreciate what that means.
And I know you've got me promising to come visit you, so we'll
I
make
know,
sure
and
that
I
we
was going to
do
mention that.
So, okay.
And I do have to say that where we can disagree, I think your personal integrity is unimpeachable. And I think you're
Thank you.
doing a very difficult job,
I hope
Director.
that's
And
the
I
case.
want to thank you for your service. Someone with your credentials, having, I believe, clerked for the Supreme Court at one point, with your great academic background, is someone who is extraordinarily valuable. And I, of course, am partial to past AGs, so we're all good.
It's very kind of you. Thank
I
you.
want to
Yeah.
I want to reiterate some of the points that you've been hearing about where we're at with the people we're trying to protect. And I think what we're all trying to get at is how do you balance protecting the consumer against access to necessary credit, whether it is small dollar lending, whether it's in manufactured housing, whether it is just access to rural communities or Native American communities to the market. I think there's a balance there. And I know I've told you frequently my story. I was probably one of the first people who got beat up by trying to shut down payday lending and predatory lending. And I learned something in that process, which are, sometimes people need diapers, and sometimes they need gas, and they have a flat tire and they can't fix it. And these are folks that are living on the margin. So I understand the need to protect people, but I also understand the need to have some form of small dollar, short-term lending. What do you think those products, this will be my last question, what do you think those products should look like, and how do we achieve that balance, and how do you as the director, I think, address the concerns that we have, which is let's give people access to credit. It helps build their credit. It helps build America, but let's also protect them. And that's a tough balance with this population.
It really is. And by the way, we first saw this issue with our mortgage rules where we, in the Dodd-Frank Act, they passed certain things that we were required to do on mortgages at a time when the mortgage market was all overheated and quite irresponsible, and the underwriting had deteriorated. And by the time we came to actually write the rules, things had crashed. The mortgage market was now frigid. Credit was very tight. It was a hugely different situation. And so as we wrote those rules, we really became very keenly aware, face to face with this problem of how do you balance protections, which we want, with access to credit, which we do not want to choke off. And that's something we tried to balance in the mortgage rules. And I think we did pretty well with it, but it's something we're constantly monitoring and trying to think about. Same thing now in these small dollar rules. We know people have a demand for small dollar credit. They've had it for over 100 years, and they get that demand served in various ways. And some products are more responsible and some are less responsible, but people have a demand. And we can't choke off a supply to them. But at the same time, we are concerned about this issue of the debt trap, people ending up thinking they're getting in and getting out, but many of them end up rolling over and getting stuck at a very high cost over a long period of time. And that's the issue we're trying to address. Now, whether the industry business model relies on that to subsidize the single demand loans, I'm not entirely clear on that. They say they don't, but maybe they do. It's something we're trying to figure out as we're working on these rules. But I have the same objective in mind that you described. People need to have access to money, and not everybody has an uncle or a sister or mother-in-law that they can go to for $300 or $500, and if they've done it once or twice, they may not be able to go to it the third time. And so we get that. At the same time, we don't want people to end up in products that harm them further. I don't know that I'm the right person to say what all the right products are. What we are trying to identify is if there's certain wrong products that we want to try to rein in a bit while still leaving access to credit. That's the right answer in that marketplace. How to get there, though, is a complex, as you say, difficult issue, and I'm hopeful and we're working hard to try to understand it enough to get it right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.